because it's about the 194, the 194, the law, 1978 law one could say is a parallel to the Roe v. Wade 1973 law. But he'll be showing us, the how this law can be used and different unexpected, unknown ramifications of the law. Thank you, Professor.
So, thank you. Just a little clarification. I started working in Vergata University in 1986, but even though I'm quite old, it took some time before becoming a professor. So I became a professor sometime later.
Later, yes, it takes time. Yes.
Sometime later.
You did get full professor in 1986. Yes.
Yes. And I teach social ethics and bioethics. I belong to those who are persuaded that there is a very strong link between social ethics and bioethics. My friend Henk Tenave has written that bioethics is a kind of social ethics, and there are very sound arguments to support this thesis. As a matter of fact, these are the two topics I am more engaged in, but I started with philosophy of religion as a disciple of Marco Maria Olivetti, and here in Rome. And I had the opportunity and the privilege to be a member and then also to chair the International Bioethics Committee of UNESCO and Committee for Bioethics of the Italian Society of Pediatrics. This is just to say that I've been involved in bioethics for a long time. So, as a fundamental premise for our meeting, as I anticipated in the abstract, I will not discuss the arguments for or against abortion, which I take for granted, the arguments for, the arguments against. I would rather like to focus on the content of the law number 194 of 1978, which regulates the voluntary termination of pregnancy in Italy, and try to reflect on it, or maybe starting from it as an illustrative example of a very complex task we are always confronted with, that is the task of the legislative power is always confronted with, that is the task of balancing different principles and sensitivities in complex pluralistic societies where many different ideas and notions of good life coexist. And so, focusing on the content of this law will also provide the opportunity to deal with some of the most relevant burning ethical issues related to abortion, the value of human life from its very beginning, the role of women's self-determination, the legitimacy and limits of state intervention to protect prenatal life, conscientious objection, and just to mention the most relevant ones. But I repeat the premise within this very precise framework. Of course, this illustration leaves open the question of the legitimacy of this balancing if and to what extent balancing should be possible with regard to this specific issue. I will take also some minutes to share with you some reflections on the ways to fulfill the duty to defend prenatal human life in the context of pluralistic and democratic societies as, once again, an illustrative, crucial example of a more general challenge and responsibility. Also, that is the challenge and responsibility of defending life, not only at the very beginning, not only at the end of life, but to say so, in between, the responsibility of defending life in between. So, on the first and broader part of my illustration. The value of human life from conception. Article 1 of the, I heard you didn't receive the text, so I will read extensively some passages of the law, starting with Article 1. Article 1 reads, the state guarantees the right to responsible and planned parenthood, recognizes the social value of motherhood, and shall protect human life from its inception. It is very interesting to underline that the law which introduced in Italy the voluntary interruption of pregnancy starts reaffirming the duty of the state to protect human life from the very beginning, from its inception. The voluntary termination of pregnancy, as covered by this law, shall not be a means of birth control. Another important statement in the letter of the law. The letter is one thing, the application of the law and what came afterwards can be different. The state, the regions and local authorities acting within their respective powers and areas of competence shall promote and develop medico-social services and shall take other measures necessary to prevent abortion from being used for purposes of birth control. Article 2 reads, the family counseling centers, i consultori familiari, established by law number 405 of 1975, shall assist any pregnant woman subject to the provision of that law, and the provision entails different kinds of intervention, among others, by helping to overcome the factors which might lead the woman to have her pregnancy terminated. By helping to overcome the factors which might lead the woman to have her pregnancy terminated. So, this is the starting point of the law. It is not to dismiss the value of human life from its very beginning. It is to assume the responsibility to strike a balance between different and sometimes possibly conflicting principles. This may be the case not only with abortion, but with many other burning ethical issues, not only in the field of bioethics, but for sure starting with the field of bioethics. And this is something that everyone should come to terms with. We live in complex societies where people may think different, and we have to try and find possible solutions to strengthen the basis of our common life, even in case of moral conflict. And this is one of the most challenging moral conflict, without any doubt. We perfectly know where the crucial point is to be found. According to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, I read number 2270, human life must be respected and protected absolutely from the moment of conception, from the first moment of his existence. A human being must be recognized as having the rights of a person, among which is the inviolable right of every innocent being to life. The following number: since the 1st century, the Church has affirmed the moral evil of every procured abortion. This teaching has not changed and remains unchangeable. Direct abortion, that is to say, abortion willed either as an end or a means, is gravely contrary to the moral law. 2272, formal cooperation in abortion constitutes a grave offense. The Church attaches the canonical penalty of excommunication to this crime against human life. The Church does not thereby intend to restrict the scope of mercy. Rather, she makes clear the gravity of the crime committed, the irreparable harm done to the innocent who is put to death, as well as to the parents and the whole of society. These are very clear words, always reaffirmed in the teaching of the Church. Don't forget the reference to the scope of mercy, which is also very relevant in this context. The mainstream idea is that the conflict in this case is between this very strong concept of the dignity of life from its very beginning, which is not to say necessarily that what we are considering is already a person, someone who is to be treated as a person in practical terms. And as I said, the current idea is that the conflict is between this very strong concept of sanctity, dignity of life from the very beginning, and the principle of self-determination, of women's self-determination. If we read carefully the content of the Italian law, things are slightly different. It is necessary to point out that is not self-determination as such the premise of the legitimization of abortion. I read Article 4. In order to undergo termination of pregnancy during the first 90 days, women whose situation is such that continuation of the pregnancy, childbirth, or motherhood would seriously endanger their physical or mental health, endanger their physical or not and or mental health, in view of their state of health, their economic, social, or family circumstances, the circumstances in which conception occurred, or the probability that the child would be born with abnormalities or malformation, and so on. So, The reference is to women's health. And this is where the possible conflict of principle takes place. This is a very important observation when we come to consider the Italian legislation. I repeat, regardless of what the application happened to be, and this relies on a very important and always cited judgment by the Italian Constitutional Court, the judgment number 27 of 1975, which established that, acknowledged that the constitutionally, quotation, the constitutionally protected interest relating to the conceived child, so there is a constitutionally protected interest relating to the conceived child, can come into collision with other goods which also enjoy constitutional protection. As a consequence, the law cannot give the former, the interest relating to the conceived child, total and absolute prevalence, denying the latter adequate protection. The condition of the pregnant woman is absolutely particular, and so this is the conclusion. There is no equivalence between the right not only to life but also to health of those who are already a person like the mother, and the protection of the embryo which a person has yet to become. This is the crucial point and the crucial sentence. So a prevalence is established, but related to health, not immediately to self-determination. And this prevalence, when you start with a balancing exercise, whatever the argument, of course you have to establish, to make a decision about what has to come as first, but this does not imply that you're going to entirely dismiss what did not come as first. This is the essential content of a balancing exercise. Of course, people can disagree on the outcome of this balancing exercise, but it's important to maintain the idea that it was conceived of as such. And this is as true that after the law, two different referendums were promoted. People remember only the, to say so, for lack of time, the so Catholic referendum against the law. But there was another initiative promoted by the radicals who were opposing the law precisely because of this idea of maintaining a balancing exercise and not going immediately quick fix to the principle of self-determination, full stop. Both of them failed. So this is the law. This is not, as I said, to ignore the fact that we read health but as a matter of fact, the protection of women's health tended to become the pure and simple respect for their self-determination, at least within the limit of the first 90 days of pregnancy. At the moment in Italy, there is a strong, lively debate concerning the decision by the government to introduce some pro-life organization in the consultori familiari with the aim of, as the law reads, of helping women to overcome the factors that can reinforce or determine the decision to interrupt the pregnancy. But regardless of how things are conceived of and imagined and put in practice, the idea in itself is not immediately contrary to the letter of the law, which is in force in Italy at the moment. In other words, the Italian law, as it stands, in my opinion, does not cannot immediately be considered as an example of the idea of abortion as a right rather than a conflict that should be avoided. The articles I read entails this idea that if possible, abortion should be avoided, and the state should intervene to help women not to resort to abortion. When the shift is towards abortion as a right to cure, the role of the state also change accordingly, and its responsibility and commitment to address and, as I said, possibly overcome the factors which might lead a woman to have her pregnancy terminated increasingly fade away. And the idea of introducing or reintroducing this mechanism of support and help immediately triggers a strong reaction against. This is, I think, an important point that is worth reflection. As I said, my contribution is to share a sensitivity towards the best way, as I'm going to say, to realize the good which is possible in the context we are living in. Two important provisions of the law attest the idea of this balancing exercise. in Italy as in many other countries. The first point concerns the legitimacy of state intervention to protect the life of who is not yet a person but will become one according to the judgment of the Constitutional Court. The legitimacy of the state intervention as a strategy of progressively increasing protection. As a question of condition and time limits, as in many other countries. I read Article 6, voluntary termination of pregnancy may be performed after the first 90 days where the pregnancy or childbirth entails a serious threat to the woman's life and where the pathological processes constituting a serious threat to the woman's physical or mental health, such those associated with serious abnormalities or malformation of the fetus, have been diagnosed. Once again, the importance of saying mental and as an alternative to physical and not bringing them together. The same applies to the questions about the end of life. Physical suffering, physical and mental suffering, physical or mental suffering. Within brackets, in Italy we had a judgment by the Constitutional Court on this subject, where some exception with regard to the article of the Penal Code concerning assisted suicide were introduced, provided that some very specific restrictive conditions are respected, and physical or mental suffering, untreatable, unbearable physical or mental suffering was introduced. And there was a bill of law which was not passed in the parliament. And in this bill, the expression was changed and it became physical and you can imagine the sort of reaction that was immediately triggered because it can change a lot. Of course, this limit, this time condition, goes together with another provision which by itself can be very controversial because, of course, it is not said that abnormalities or malformation of the fetus can be a justification for interrupting pregnancy after the first 90 days, but only because of the consequences on mother health. However, it is something that can be considered as a very controversial provision because of the reference to disabilities, of course. Article 7, the second threshold, where the termination of pregnancy is necessary in view of an imminent threat to the woman's life, it may be performed without observing the procedures referred to in the preceding paragraph, where it is possible that the fetus may be viable, pregnancy may be terminated only in the case referred to in item A of section 6, that is, where the pregnancy or childbirth entails a serious threat to the woman's life. This is why I speak of a progressively increasing protection of prenatal life. And we can say that as soon as the condition of viability has been gained, there is a strict obligation to do everything that is possible to save at the same time both the life of the mother and the life of the fetus. It will be a long digression to focus on what scientific and technological progress has meant with regard to this provision, because the condition of viability has been ever and ever anticipated. 24 weeks, 23, 22, who knows where the limit will be eventually set, if a limit, a final limit will be set. The second point concerns a conscientious objection. Conscientious objection is a crucial tool in democratic society to preserve the possibility to include as much.
Again, thank you. So sorry, we have to leave early. But we apologize.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. To include as much as possible the idea of pluralism. Of course, it is not to say that it is equivalent to deny the legitimacy of something, but to preserve a space, an important space of freedom for those who cannot share, cannot agree with the majority opinion. So Article 9, health personnel and allied health personnel shall not be required to assist in the procedure referred to in sections 5 and 7 or in pregnancy termination if they have a conscientious objection declared in advance. Conscientious objection may not be invoked by health personnel or allied health personnel if, under the particular circumstances, their personal intervention is essential in order to save the life of a woman in imminent danger. Now I move to the second shorter part of my presentation. Shorter does not mean less important. I prefer to start again with a quotation by the Catechism of the Catholic Church in order to make the context clearer. Number 2273, that reads as follows: the inalienable right to life of every innocent human individual is a constitutive element of a civil society and its legislation. The inalienable rights of the person must be recognized and respected by civil society and the political authority. These human rights depend neither on single individuals nor on the parents, nor do they represent a concession made by society and the state. They belong to human nature and are inherent in the person by virtue of the creative act from which the person took his origin. Among such fundamental rights, one should mention in this regard every human being's right to life and physical integrity from the moment of conception and until death. The moment a positive law deprives a category of human beings of the protection which civil legislation ought to accord them, the state is denying the equality of all before the law. When the state does not place its power at the service of the rights of each citizen, and in particular of the more vulnerable, the very foundation of a state based on law are undermined. As a consequence of respect and protection which must be ensured for the unborn child from the moment of conception, the law must provide appropriate penal sanction for every deliberate violation of the child's rights. This is a very challenging point because, as a matter of fact, most practically almost all democratic Western societies have a legislation which legitimize abortion, and France has recently changed its constitution, introducing explicitly the reference to a right to abortion. And it could well happen that something like that will be introduced also at the level of the European Union. I would try to share with you some personal reflection, but not only personal, on this point. In the Evangelium Vitae of John Paul II, number 73, we read, Catholics are called on to take on the duty to always take on the duty of limiting the harm and reduce the negative effects of a law at the level of general opinion and public morality. Reduce the negative effects of a law, provided that it is a law that Catholics cannot agree with. How to interpret this duty? I would like and go towards the conclusion of my reflection, so to leave open the floor for some debate. A premise and two possible strategies. I take the premise from a volume that has been recently published by the Pontifical Academy of Life on theological ethics of life. Maybe you are going to know more about that in the Academy. And I quote number 159. The question is about the objective of contributing to the construction of a public sphere in which the members of an open society recognize each other not as enemies but as partners. We are called on to recognize each other, all of us, not as enemies but as partners, including those who share very different opinions from our own. So I quote, "It is necessary to realize that aiming for the good of society involves protecting rather than eroding a space for moral pluralism, open to an interaction between differences on the assumption that the public sphere is not only the neutral space to be conquered or won, and that the members of an open society must not be approached as enemies, but as partners. Dialogue between moral subjects, be they strangers or friends, to use the distinction in vogue, can only function on the presumption that every claim to meaning and truth is, at the same time, a declaration of freedom and respect for others. This is a very relevant, challenging, demanding assumption. Promising yet challenging task to perform. So, what about the two strategies? Very, very briefly, but I want to say open words. This is, in my opinion, this is a very crucial point in order to clarify and promote the role and the presence and the contribution of Catholics within pluralistic societies. The first strategy is quite well known, and I want to offer you two quotations by very different contexts. The first one is a very well-known quotation by John Rawls. Some of us come from the US, and it is a quotation taken from the idea of public reason revisited. Rawls worked and kept thinking on the issue of abortion long. And the second one is by Cardinal Camillo Ruini, who was the president of the Bishop Conference, of the Italian Bishop Conference, so a strong representative of the Catholic doctrine and teaching. I leave to your judgment the possibility and limits of overlapping between these two statements. So, Rawls. It may happen, for example, that the decision to recognize the right to abortion is contested by Catholics. We can imagine that they present an argument in public reason that excludes such a right, but that they fail to obtain a majority. And yet, they do not have to exercise the right to abortion themselves. What they can therefore do is recognize it as belonging to legitimate law promulgated in accordance with legitimate political institutions and public reason, and therefore avoid opposing it by force. Naturally, Catholics do not, for this reason, lose the right to continue to propose arguments against the right to abortion, which is not so obvious in other words. Cardinale Camillo Ruini, in the opening speech at the 7th Forum of the Cultural Project of the Italian Episcopal Conference in 2006, in the most controversial areas, we need to rely on the free exchange of ideas, respecting the democratic outcomes, even when we cannot agree on them. The supporters of relativism will continue to think that in certain cases, the rights of freedom have been violated, while the supporters of an approach linked to the being of man will continue to believe that in other cases, rights based on nature and therefore antecedent to every human decision, that is to say, that cannot be revoked by a majority decision, have been violated, but there will be no reason to accuse each other of anti-democratic extremism. So, this is a first strategy to consider. There is also a second one, which immediately refers to the quotation I proposed to you from this recent book by the Pontifical Academy. That is the idea that an effort to contribute to the reduction of moral conflict, when possible, can be considered as part of the responsibility of arriving at a law whose negative effects are as minimal as possible in the given circumstances. That is to say, an effort to be deployed in advance, not only after a law has been adopted, that is to say, building on the awareness in many controversial issues that the good that is possible is not always all the good we would like. The good that is possible is not always all the good we would like. The case of abortion remains probably the most difficult to deal with. In my opinion, much more difficult than the issue referring to the end of life. This is not to support the idea of euthanasia. Please avoid any misunderstanding. I'm just saying that, in my opinion, which is not necessarily a good one, a sound one, it should be easier to come to terms with ethical controversies in the case of end-of-life issues as compared with the case of abortion. But this is also, and this is my conclusion, this is also where the importance of testimony and consistency of behavior steps in. In other words, I'm not persuaded at all that insisting on changing the law is an effective tool, is necessarily the most effective tool to change a culture, a widespread sensitivity, if you have not the capacity, the ability to work on broadening the idea of self-determination, of personal freedoms, and so on, as to include the idea of generativity, the idea of openness to the life that, a new life that is coming toward. And this is a matter, and the responsibility for testimony, for, as I said, consistency of personal behavior, probably more than of, or together with that's all. So